When I found out that the HOA president was slowly poisoning my mom's water supply, I didn't just feel anger. I wanted to take action. I decided to buy their water rights and cut them off completely. What would you do if someone was secretly making your family sick to push you out of your home? It was a routine afternoon, and I was watering my mom's prized roses when I spotted Karen Thompson's shiny black SUV coming down our driveway, kicking up gravel. My stomach tightened. Every time the HOA president showed up, trouble followed. "Alex," Karen called through her barely rolled down window. "Those garden gnomes need to go. They violate Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our community guidelines." I put down my watering can and replied, "They've been here for 7 years, Karen, since Dad died." Karen's smile didn't genuinely reach her eyes. "Rules are rules. I've been lenient, but the board insists you remove them by Friday or face a $200 fine per gnome." As she drove away, I counted each garden gnome, 8 in total, each representing a cherished memory with Dad. Ignoring her would mean a staggering $1,600 in fines, a sum we couldn't afford with Mom's medical bills piling up. Mom appeared at the screen door, leaning for support. "Is that Karen again?" she asked. "Just HOA business," I replied, not wanting to worry her. Lately, Mom had been experiencing dizzy spells, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. That evening, I carefully wrapped each gnome in newspaper and tucked them away in the garage. Dad had bought one for every year on Mom's birthday, and now they sat in darkness, pieces of our happiness slipping away. When Friday arrived, I saw Karen walking around the neighborhood with her clipboard, checking for violations. She paused at our garden and made a show of nodding in approval before jotting something down. By Monday, we received another notice. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of blue and needed to be repainted the approved midnight azure from the HOA color palette. "It's just a mailbox," I told Mom while repainting it, reasoning that it wasn't worth fighting over. But then the following week, it was our bird feeder, then our wind chimes, and next, the height of our hedges. Each time Karen visited, Mom seemed to feel worse, more tired and more confused. I started to wonder if all the stress was affecting her health. One evening, while I was taking out the trash, I noticed Doug Thompson, Karen's husband, lingering near our water meter at the edge of our property. When he saw me, he quickly walked away, pretending to check his phone. "Everything okay?" I called out. "Just walking the dog," he replied, though I felt something was off. I didn't see any dog with him, so I mentioned it to our neighbor Elaine Rodriguez, who lives across the street. "The Thompsons don't even have a dog," she whispered, leaning over her fence. "If you've made it this far and are enjoying the drama of these HOA stories, you're not alone. Don't miss out on the rest of the story. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for even more shocking twists." And between you and me, Karen's been targeting anyone who voted against her at the last HOA election. Your mom was the only one who spoke up about Karen's plan to double our dues. That night, Mom was feeling really unwell. She couldn't keep dinner down, and her skin looked yellow in the bathroom light as she hunched over the toilet. "I think we should go to the hospital," I said, helping her to the car. At the emergency room, the doctor ran some tests but didn't find anything conclusive. "It could be a virus," he suggested, "or possibly something environmental. Have there been any changes at home recently?" On the drive back, Mom dozed in the passenger seat. I took the long way home, passing the Thompson house. Their lights were on, and I could see Karen and Doug laughing over wine glasses in their kitchen window. The next morning, Mom couldn't get out of bed. Her hands shook so badly that she couldn't hold her coffee mug. I called Dr. Patel's office, and he agreed to fit her in. While waiting, I walked our property line, looking for anything unusual near the water meter where I had seen Doug. The ground looked disturbed, and kneeling down, I noticed small droplets of blue liquid on some nearby rocks. Then my phone rang. It was the hospital. "Your mom has collapsed in Dr. Patel's office," the nurse explained. "We're running toxicology screens. The doctor suspects some type of poisoning." Poisoning? My mind flashed to Doug by our water meter, the blue drops, and the timing of Mom's worsening symptoms after Karen's visits. I rushed to the hardware store and bought a security camera. That night, I installed it in our oak tree, pointing directly at the water meter. If Doug came back, I wanted proof. Mom stayed in the hospital for 3 days. Her tests showed elevated levels of strange chemicals, but nothing the doctors could immediately identify. Whatever it is, it's causing liver and kidney stress, Dr. Patel explained. Has she been exposed to any chemicals, pesticides, or new cleaning products? When we got home, there was a notice taped to our door. The HOA was fining us for unauthorized landscaping because I hadn't mowed the lawn while taking care of Mom in the hospital. I crumpled the notice in frustration, just as my security camera alerted me that someone was at our water meter. I raced outside, barely catching a glimpse of Doug Thompson hurrying away, while Karen waited in their SUV at the curb, the engine running. "What's happening to our water?" I yelled as Karen rolled down her window. "Alex, you're clearly under stress. Maybe your mother's illness is affecting your judgment." They drove off before I could say anything back. My hands trembled as I reviewed the security footage. There it was. Doug, pouring something from a small bottle into our water line, with Karen keeping watch, both of them smiling. I swiftly grabbed a water sample from our kitchen tap along with the footage. These people were poisoning my mother, and I was determined to bring them to justice. The water testing lab didn't look like much. It was just another storefront in a strip mall. But when I explained my concerns to the technician, Dave, he took my sample seriously. "It'll take 48 hours for complete results," he said, "but I can do a quick screening for common contaminants today." While waiting, I visited Mom at the hospital. Her skin looked gray against the white sheets, and dark circles hung under her eyes like bruises. "The neighbors keep asking about you," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Elaine brought soup, and even Mr. Jenkins from 2 doors down sent flowers." Mom attempted a smile. "And Karen, has she sent another violation notice while I've been away?" I squeezed her hand gently. "Don't worry about Karen right now." Just then, my phone vibrated with a text from Dave. "Call me ASAP." My heart raced as I stepped into the hallway. "What did you find?" "Ethylene glycol," Dave replied grimly. "Antifreeze. There's a low concentration, but it's definitely there. I've never seen it in residential water before. You should contact the police immediately." I drove straight to the police station with my water sample and video footage in hand. Officer Martinez listened to my report, but she seemed skeptical. "The video shows someone at your water meter, but we can't clearly see what they're pouring," she explained. "Trace amounts of chemicals can enter water systems in many ways." "My mother is in the hospital with organ damage," I protested. "The timing lines up perfectly with when the Thompsons were at our meter." "We'll investigate," she promised, but I left feeling frustrated. Back home, I found another HOA notice waiting for me. It stated that unauthorized security equipment must be removed within 24 hours. They knew about my camera, which meant they had been monitoring our house. The next day, I installed 3 more hidden cameras. If the Thompsons returned, I wanted to make sure I caught everything from multiple angles. At the hospital, Dr. Patel confirmed what the water test had shown. Ethylene glycol poisoning matched Mom's symptoms. "We've made changes to her treatment, but the damage to her kidneys might be permanent." The word permanent lingered in my mind as I drove home, gripping the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white. A voicemail notification chimed on my phone. It was Malcolm Reed, the HOA treasurer. "Alex, we need to talk about the allegations you're making. The board takes homeowner disputes seriously, but accusing fellow residents of criminal activity without proof can have serious consequences." Feeling frustrated, I deleted the message and called my college friend Jamie, who now works as an environmental lawyer. I explained, "They're poisoning her slowly. It's just enough to make her sick, not enough to kill her quickly. They want us out because my mom opposed their fee increases. This is serious." "Alex," Jamie replied, "if the police won't help, we need to think outside the box. Share everything you know about Pinecrest Gardens infrastructure." For the next 3 hours, we examined property records, utility agreements, and the HOA charter. Jamie found something noteworthy. Unlike most neighborhoods where water is supplied by the city, Pinecrest Gardens gets its water from private wells run by a company called Clearwater LLC. "Look at this." She sent me a link. Clearwater filed for Chapter 11 last month. They're restructuring, which means they might be selling some assets. "Why does that matter?" I asked. "Because whoever owns the water rights controls the water supply," Jamie explained. The HOA has a long-term contract with Clearwater, but if someone else acquires the company, a plan started to take shape in my mind. How much would it cost to buy a struggling water company? I wondered aloud. More than most people have just sitting around, Jamie admitted, but maybe less than you think, especially in bankruptcy proceedings. I considered my mom's worsening health, the piling hospital bills, and the smug look Karen always wore. I've got some savings, my 401k, and there's equity in the house. Think this through, Alex. It's a significant step. The next morning, as I was about to head out to see my mom, I noticed Karen's SUV blocking my driveway. She rolled down her window, wearing a smile that felt overly friendly. Alex, the board is worried about your mother. If her health is affecting the upkeep of the property, it might be time to consider assisted living. I know of a lovely facility in the next county. My fists tightened in frustration. My mother isn't going anywhere. Well, the neighborhood has certain expectations, Karen replied, her tone dismissive. We've been patient, but the violations are stacking up. The fines are now over $3,000. I never received notices about most of these supposed violations, I shot back, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on me. They were delivered according to the HOA rules. I felt a chill when I realized this wasn't just a random annoyance. They were trying to push us out. I'll take care of the fines, I said calmly to Karen. Then I added, and you might want to be careful about the water here. I've heard it might not be safe. For just a moment, her smile faded before she drove away. At the hospital, Mom had visitors. Elaine and 3 other neighbors who had previously clashed with Karen were there. We don't believe what the HOA is saying about you and your mom, Elaine said. Karen's been getting worse since she took over as president. She seems more power-hungry. I asked if anyone else had fallen ill. The neighbors shared worried looks. Not sick, exactly, Mr. Jenkins replied, but my dog died suddenly last month after Karen complained about his barking. The vet couldn't explain it. I pulled out the water test results to show them, but I kept the video hidden. I didn't want to put them in danger. We're with you, Elaine promised. Just tell us how we can help. That evening, I reached out to Ja's contact at a bank and law firm. After explaining my plan, I emptied my savings account and applied for a home equity loan. The next day, during my visit with Mom, Dr. Patel took me aside. Her kidneys are functioning at only 40%, he informed me. She will need dialysis and possibly a transplant soon. I sat in the hospital parking lot, my thoughts a jumbled mess as anger simmered inside me when my phone rang. Jamie here. The initial offer has been submitted, she said. Now we wait. 2 days later, Malcolm Reed left another voicemail. Alex, we've heard disturbing rumors about your intentions regarding Clearwater LLC. The board wants to meet with you immediately to discuss concerns about water access. They were worried, and that was good. I deleted the message and checked my hidden cameras. There were no signs of the Thompsons near our water meter, but I noticed Doug's car had passed by our house 6 times yesterday. The bank had approved my loan, and soon after, Jim's contact informed me that our offer for Clearwater LLC had been accepted. In just 1 week, I would own the company that controlled the HOA's water supply. That night, as I sat by Mom's hospital bed, watching her sleep peacefully, I made a promise to myself. Karen Thompson thought she could poison my mother and walk away unharmed. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. My hands shook with anger as I reviewed the lab results. The water sample from our home contained ethylene glycol, antifreeze. The situation felt unbearable. My mom had been getting sicker each day, and the thought that someone was intentionally harming her was infuriating. I slammed my fist on the table, rattling my coffee cup. Who could do this to a kind woman in her 60s? I quickly called Detective Rivera. I have proof, I said urgently. The lab found antifreeze in our water. Plus, I have video evidence of Doug Thompson tampering with our water line. The detective sighed. I understand you're upset, but the video doesn't clearly show what he's adding, if anything, and finding chemicals in your water doesn't pinpoint who put them there. Are you serious? They're poisoning my mother. My voice trembled. I need direct evidence linking the Thompsons to these chemicals. Keep that video safe, and we'll continue our investigation, he replied. Later that day, a bright red notice emblazoned with bold letters appeared on our door. Violation. Unauthorized surveillance equipment must be removed within 48 hours or face a $500 fine. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Of course, Karen would want to get rid of the cameras that caught her husband in the act. I took pictures of the notice and called my mom's doctor to share the lab results. "We can adjust her treatment now that we know what we're dealing with," he said. "But Alex, she needs to stop being exposed immediately." "I'm trying everything," I whispered, glancing at my mom, who was sleeping in her hospital bed with tubes running from her arms. That night, sleep eluded me. I paced the living room until 3 a.m., searching online for information about our HOA's water system. A forgotten memory resurfaced. My dad had once mentioned something peculiar about our neighborhood's water setup. I rummaged through his old files in the basement until dawn. A folder labeled Home Purchase caught my eye. Inside, I discovered documents showing that Pinecrest Gardens didn't get its water directly from the city, but rather from a private company called Clearwater LLC. Curiosity piqued. I spent the day researching Clearwater LLC instead of heading to work. Their website looked outdated, last updated in 2018. Public records indicated they held water rights for 3 neighborhoods, including ours. More alarmingly, a recent Business Journal article stated they were on the verge of bankruptcy following the death of their founder. I hadn't spoken to my old college roommate Jason, a water rights attorney in Colorado, in years, but I decided to give him a call. "Jason, it's Alex. I have a strange legal question." After explaining everything, there was a long silence on the line. I wondered if we had lost the connection. "So you're saying this company controls your HOA's water?" he finally asked, making me realize just how deep this investigation might go. It seems like Clearwater LLC is going under, and Jason finally mentioned it. I couldn't believe my ears when he asked if I wanted to buy it. My heart raced at the thought. Could I really do that? Yes, technically, water rights are properties that can be bought and sold. But what exactly was I planning to do? I glanced at the empty chair where Mom should have been, working on her crossword puzzles. "Justice, this could cost you everything," Jason cautioned. But I thought, what's money compared to Mom's life? My mind was already buzzing with ideas. Later that evening, I visited Mom in the hospital. Under the bright lights, her skin had a yellow tint. "Any news on what's making me sick?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, unsure of how much to share with her. Just then, Karen Thompson walked in with a bouquet of flowers that looked more like a deceptive offering. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here," she said, feigning surprise. "I've been so worried about your mother." We locked eyes, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was aware that I knew her true intentions. Was this visit just to gauge the situation? "How thoughtful of you," I replied coolly. "Mom needs rest now, so you should go." Karen set the flowers down and touched Mom's foot. "We're all praying for you, Margaret. The neighborhood isn't the same without your smile." After she left, Mom looked puzzled. That was strange. She's never brought me flowers before. I gripped the bed rail tightly, feeling my knuckles turn white. "Mom, can I ask you something important? Do you trust me with your life?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes. I might have to do something drastic to keep you safe, and it might make some people angry." She smiled faintly and murmured what Dad always said, "Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire." As the medication took hold, her eyes drifted shut. When I stepped out of the hospital, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Jason, sending me the contact details for Clearwater LLC's bankruptcy attorney. The subject line read, "Are you sure about this?" Honestly, I wasn't sure about much, but I knew Karen and her friends deserved to face consequences for their actions. "Are you looking to buy Clearwater LLC?" the bankruptcy attorney asked, staring at me like I had 2 heads. "The company that manages 3 failing water systems, including Pinecrest Gardens?" I nodded confidently, even though my heart raced. "That's exactly what I want." "But why?" he asked. "The infrastructure needs upgrades, and they're behind on their permits." "I have my reasons," I interrupted. He named a price that felt shocking, one that would wipe out my savings and even hit my 401k hard. I still needed a loan, but then I thought of my mom's pale face. It was clear I had to act. "I'll need a couple of weeks to gather the funds," I said as I walked to my car. Doubts swirled in my mind. Was I making a mistake? Could I really manage this? Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. My mom's kidney function was declining. In that moment, any uncertainty faded away. The next morning, I applied for a home equity loan and decided to withdraw some of my retirement savings. The bank manager looked surprised, but didn't question my decision. I called my employer and requested unpaid leave for a family emergency. While I awaited the loan approval, I took a trip to the county records office. I needed to gather all the information regarding Clearwater LLC. Doris, a helpful gray-haired clerk, guided me through the filing system. "This is an interesting company," she said. "They've owned those water rights since 1983. It was well managed until old Mr. Jenkins passed away. Do you know if they have any special authority over the neighborhoods they serve?" she asked with a smile. "Sweetheart, the one who controls the water controls everything. That's been true since ancient times." To my surprise, the loan approval came through quicker than I expected. I signed a hefty stack of papers, trying to ignore the weight of the debt I was taking on. Jason called to check in on me. "Are you really going through with this? You know you'll be responsible for providing water to hundreds of homes, right?" "I only care about one home," I replied. "But don't worry, I'm not planning to leave anyone without water for good." "That doesn't sound very reassuring," he muttered. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and piles of paperwork later, I found myself in a stark conference room signing the final documents. The bankruptcy attorney still looked bewildered, yet satisfied to conclude the complicated case. "Congratulations," he said, sliding a folder my way. "You now own Clearwater LLC, including all its assets, permits, and obligations. The staff password sheet for the digital systems is in here." As I drove home with the folder beside me, it felt surreal. I was now in control of the water supply for the very people who had harmed my mother. The reality of that power made me dizzy. I made a stop at the hospital first. Mom was resting, her face thin and worn. Dr. Ray Patel met me in the hallway, his expression serious. "We've removed the toxins from her system, but there's been damage to her kidneys and liver. She might recover somewhat with time, but some effects could be permanent." Rage bubbled inside me. Permanent? She had been perfectly fine before this. "I'm sorry," he murmured softly. "The good news is she's stable enough to come home next week. You'll need to keep a close eye on her, though." As a nurse approached with fresh sheets, I noticed her warm demeanor. "What a sweet lady," she mentioned, then added, "That neighbor of yours stops by daily with flowers. I think her name is Karen. She says your mom is like family to her." A lump formed in my throat as I realized the truth. Karen was playing the concerned neighbor while her husband's actions created chaos. After thanking the nurse, I sat with my mom until visiting hours ended. On my way out, I noticed Karen in the gift shop, picking out another bouquet. I instinctively ducked behind a display, watching her as she bought lilies and asked the clerk for a card. Through the shop window, I saw her carefully writing a note. To anyone else, her expression might appear concerned, but I could sense the satisfaction beneath it. When I got home, I opened the Clearwater LLC folder, seeking the login details for their billing and water management system. The outdated software took its time loading, but eventually I accessed all the water management information for Pinecrest Gardens, including flow rates, billing details, and shutoff controls. Just after midnight, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Alex. This is Malcolm Reed from the HOA board." His voice was tense. "We've learned that you purchased Clearwater LLC." Surprised, my heart raced. "How did you find out so quickly?" I asked, attempting to sound calm. "News travels fast," he replied. "The board would like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss this unusual situation." "I'm not interested in meeting," I stated firmly. "Be reasonable," Malcolm urged, his tone hardening. "We all live here, and this affects everyone in Pinecrest Gardens." "So does my mom," I shot back, feeling anger rise. "She might not be around much longer because of your friends." "I don't know what you're implying, but let Karen and the board know they will receive official notice tomorrow." I ended the call before he could respond. I spent the night learning the water system controls. By morning, I drafted an official notice to the HOA board. Effective immediately, water rates would increase by 400% for all Pinecrest Gardens residents. As the sun rose, I walked to our community mailbox and mailed identical letters to each board member. Then, I drove to the small Clearwater LLC office that I now owned and changed the locks. Inside, dusty filing cabinets held decades of records. In a file labeled Pinecrest Gardens, I discovered something intriguing. A contract clause that allowed for emergency rate adjustments without notice. My phone started ringing incessantly. First it was Malcolm, then several other board members. I decided to let them go to voicemail. But when I saw Karen's name pop up, I picked up. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice low and intense. "Managing my business," I replied, keeping my tone even. "This is illegal. You can't just quadruple our water rates overnight." "Actually, I can. Just check Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the original contract." There was a pause on the line. "Now, what do you want?" For the first time in weeks, I felt a small smile creep on my face. "Let's discuss what you've been putting in my mother's water." The next morning, at 7 a.m., Karen banged on my door, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do this. It's extortion," she yelled, waving the water bill like a weapon. I leaned against the door frame, surprisingly collected. "Isn't that a bit like slowly poisoning an elderly woman?" "You have no proof," she shot back, glancing nervously at my security camera. "I don't need proof anymore," I replied. "I have something much stronger. I have control." Throughout the day, my phone didn't let up. Malcolm called 6 times, and board members I had never spoken to were now eager to talk. I let most calls go to voicemail, but eventually answered when Malcolm reached out from a different number. "This is unacceptable. People can't pay these rates," he sputtered. "I have conditions," I stated calmly. First, a public admission of what Karen and Doug did to my mom. Second, they need to leave Pinecrest Gardens permanently. Third, a fund must be created for my mom's medical bills. They are over $200,000 now. "That's outrageous. We can't admit to something without proof." "Then I guess I'll have to shut off water service to the entire neighborhood except for my house. I checked with 3 lawyers. It's completely legal." He hung up, and just 20 minutes later, Karen sent out a text about an emergency HOA meeting that night at the community center. In her message, she called me a neighborhood terrorist who was holding our water hostage. I hadn't planned to attend, but my neighbor Ted knocked on my door around 6:30 p.m. "You should come," he said quietly. "Karen is telling everyone you're making up stories about her poisoning your mom because you're upset about NOM violations." When I entered the community center, it buzzed with angry voices, but as soon as I stepped inside, the chatter stopped. Karen stood at the front with a pointer, showcasing a slide that read, "Water Terrorist," with my picture beneath it. "Here he is now," she declared, her voice dripping with drama. "The man who thinks he can bankrupt us all over some silly garden decoration rules." I stepped up to the front, reaching out for the microphone. Karen held on tightly, but Malcolm nervously gestured for her to hand it over. I took a breath and spoke, my voice a bit shaky. "I purchased Clearwater LLC for one reason. My mother has been in the hospital for weeks. 3 separate tests found antifreeze in our water line. I have video evidence of Doug Thompson tampering with our water supply, with Karen watching." A low hum of conversation spread through the crowd. In a panic, Karen lunged for the microphone. "It's all lies. You have no proof. He's just upset because we enforce the rules that everyone else follows." I faced the audience asking, why would I invest my life savings in a water company instead of garden gnomes? Doug then stood up, his face red. "This is defamation. We'll sue you." From the back, an older woman raised her hand. "My dog got sick last month after Karen complained about my holiday decorations. The vet found something strange in his blood but couldn't identify it." Another neighbor chimed in. "My kids had stomach problems for weeks after we had a disagreement about fence height. After switching to bottled water, they got better." Karen looked visibly shaken. "This is absurd. You're all being manipulated," she shouted. As the meeting spiraled into chaos, I quietly slipped out. When I arrived home, I discovered my mailbox was smashed and "Liar" had been spray painted on my garage door. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." I opened my inbox to find a message with no text, just a video attachment. I clicked on it, revealing a recording of Karen and Doug arguing in their garage. Doug was seen pouring liquid from a container labeled antifreeze into a smaller bottle. Just a few drops in the right places, and problem neighbors solve themselves, Doug said. I quickly forwarded the video to everyone on the HOA mailing list. By noon, police cars filled our street as they escorted Karen and Doug away in handcuffs. I watched from my window, pondering who had sent me the video and why they had waited until now to share it. Then my phone rang. It was the hospital. "Your mother's kidneys are failing. We need to start dialysis immediately," Dr. Patel explained. The damage was severe. As I tried to process this news, my phone buzzed incessantly. News vans were parked at the neighborhood entrance. The police had called twice, asking for copies of my water test results and security footage. They discovered 6 bottles of antifreeze in the Thompsons' garage. One person told me about a cap designed to test for chemicals, which matched the results from the water samples taken from our neighborhood. That evening, when I returned home, I found 30 neighbors gathered on my lawn, holding candles. Ted came forward and handed me an envelope. "We collected some money to help with your mom's medical bills," he said. "It's not a lot, but it's a start." Inside, I found $1,470 in checks and cash, an unexpected show of support. However, whispers began to circulate. Mrs. Gonzalez, who lived 3 doors down, mentioned that Karen had claimed my mom was faking her illness for attention. This rumor spread quickly, leading to sensational headlines like HOA horror, couple poison neighbor's water over garden gnomes. Soon after, 3 other families reported having strange illnesses after disputes with Karen. Malcolm called me from a different number, his voice trembling. "I swear I didn't know what they were doing. Please believe me." When I asked if he helped cover it up, he went silent, and I knew the truth. The preliminary hearing drew a crowd. Karen and Doug pleaded not guilty, insisting the evidence was fabricated, and their lawyer painted me as a bitter homeowner seeking revenge. Their bail was set at $500,000 each. Following this, Malcolm and 2 other board members stepped down after text messages revealed they had discussed my mother's illness months earlier. The HOA office was overwhelmed with angry calls demanding resignations. I then received a letter from the district attorney proposing a plea deal that would keep Karen and Doug out of prison for 5 years instead of a possible 20. I declined, stating they tried to kill my mother slowly and painfully. They deserved the maximum sentence. In the meantime, Ted and 5 neighbors formed a new interim HOA board. Their first decision was to pause all fines and violations while reviewing the bylaws. The water company became a hot topic. The HOA's lawyers argued that I had illegally purchased my property, but my paperwork was in order. I announced new water rates, typical pricing for most residents, but a higher rate for properties owned by anyone who had been part of Karen's board. I told reporters, "This is simply a business decision. I assess risk differently for those who supported poisoners." The next day, former board members put their homes up for sale, but no one showed interest. Meanwhile, my mother's health began to improve thanks to dialysis, although doctors warned she might eventually need a kidney transplant. I spent my days researching treatments and my nights sleeping in her hospital room. On day 17, I woke up to find... As I sat there, she looked at me and said, "You look terrible," a weak smile on her face. I joked back, "You should see the other guys," even as tears rolled down my cheeks. The week after, police found a journal in Karen's bedside table that listed all the people she had targeted over the past 3 years. There were 15 families mentioned, along with 3 pets that had died under strange circumstances, and 1 elderly man who had to move to assisted living due to mysterious health issues. Because of this, the prosecutor added 14 more charges against her. My mom came home 63 days after she collapsed. As our car pulled up, neighbors lined the street, clapping to show their support. Ted and his wife had gone above and beyond, cleaning our house, stocking the fridge, and even returning the garden gnomes to their places. They also added 20 new gnomes from other neighbors, saying, "We thought you might want to rebuild your collection." Then, the following Sunday, Elaine Jenkins, the new president of the HOA board and someone who had clearly disliked Karen for years, knocked on our door. She handed me an official document explaining that the board had unanimously voted to permanently exempt our property from all HOA regulations. "We'd like to name the community garden after your mom, if that's okay," she said. When I shared the news with my mom, she cried. 2 months later, Karen and Doug accepted a plea deal of 12 years each, along with restitution. During the impact statements, my mom looked directly at them and said simply, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget." I decided to transfer ownership of Clearwater LLC to a community trust managed by Ted, Elaine, and a few other neighbors. The money from this trust would be used to cover medical expenses for all of Karen's victims. Just yesterday, we held the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Helen Morrison Healing Garden at the community center. Every family brought a garden gnome to place along the pathway. I still keep the security cameras running. Some lessons are ones you only need to learn once.